Hello, and I'm so glad you are back to tune into Medical Experts in Football. Well, if you are new, I want to warmly welcome you. I'm Taiwo, the host, and I'm also a PT and sports journalist. And before I go on, I need you all to do me a favor. After you listen to this episode, make sure you go rate it and share with your fellow colleagues. Now, here's our next guest.
It's a very good question, and I don't know if I'm the right guy to answer this.
Yeah.
But I think the Dutch feel like there's respect in speaking out the truth, but the way the truth comes out can be delivered in different packages. You can deliver it a little bit friendly or just blunt and say it into people's faces. I think the Dutch are quite direct and quite just say it as it is.
That's Dr. Nick van der Horst, the sports PT and rehab coordinator for the first team football club PSV Eindhoven in Eredivise, the top professional league in the Netherlands. Have you been to the States before?
I have been to the States, but never on a professional level.
What state have you visited, and what do you remember about that experience?
It was Florida, and it was Miami, and I've been to New York, actually. Florida, I was quite young. I remember the Disney World, which was amazing. And New York, I remember shopping and a fantastic jazz club in Harlem. I don't know the name anymore, which was also very impressive. But it was always for pleasure, never for anything professional.
Yeah, and this was when you were younger, like.
Florida, I must have been like 14 years old, but New York was 10 years ago or something, 8 years ago.
And I never like to generalize, but what do you remember maybe about the people there? Anything stick out to you when you went to New York?
I remember that people are very, very open. So it's easy to communicate with everybody. That's a good thing. And people are very friendly. That's always nice. Yeah. I think the States are so big that it's hard to form an opinion, because I think I think it would be very different in Florida or Texas compared to New York, compared to LA. So I'm actually planning on visiting a lot more. But distances, days off from a football team is also hard sometimes. So
absolutely,
future plans, yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. I was actually born in New York. So New York people, I think they're definitely more on the go, like they're busy. Yeah. I grew up in the South, which people, I mean, they're very friendly to me and open, and they smile out. Now, I am not going to generalize, but I did do my research about Netherlands, and I actually did a story about...
Just to interrupt, you know that New York is actually Dutch, right?
Is it really?
Whoa! I believe it was New Amsterdam. I mean, I don't know if I got my history straight there. Let's.
You know, as a journalist, I'm gonna have to double check you on that, because I'm not used to. I'm not used to my guests giving me some trivia. So the Netherlands trivia is coming, FYI. But I was reading something, and I did a story with a Dutch player, because she plays college soccer. She played college soccer at Arizona State. And she was talking about how one of the changes or adaptations she had to do within her team was for her teammates to understand how direct and blunt that she can be when she's communicating on the field. Why are you guys like that? Are you like that? Are you very blunt and just tell it like it is? I mean, I love it.
It's a very good question, and I don't know if I'm the right guy to answer this.
Yeah.
But I think the Dutch feel like there's respect in speaking out the truth, but the way the truth comes out can be delivered in different packages. You can deliver it a little bit friendly or just blunt and say it into people's faces. I think the Dutch are quite direct and quite just say it as it is, to avoid confusion, to avoid getting the wrong message across. But this is something that I've heard a lot about Dutch people.
So it's somewhat true.
And I think in some situations it's very convenient, but in some situations it might be better to wrap up the truth a little bit. So.
You know, I think I have some Netherlands blood in me because I've always been a very blunt person, and living in America, I will have to say not most, but a good amount of people tend to sugarcoat things and not be straightforward. So I like that. So I think we're going to get along. Now for the
let's hope.
Now for the Netherlands trivia, I got just 3 trivia questions before we get into your journey to obviously working as a physical therapist and your research and all the things you've been doing. So your country is in the Guinness World Record for having the oldest what in the world?
Mill.
I have to check that one. Maybe that is one, but not quite. What's another one? It's a song.
It's a song. The anthem?
There you go.
Is it really?
It's the anthem, the national anthem. It's called Het Wilhelmus. Is that how to pronounce it? Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'll give you half a point for that. Now, second question. Where and what is the Garden of Europe? It's somewhere in
Netherlands. Our flower Delft.
Is it Keukenhof? Keukenhof.
Oh, Keukenhof. Yeah, Keukenhof. It's in Delft or The Hague or Leiden, somewhere over there, I think.
Is it worth visiting? Because you apparently don't know of it.
Of course it's worth visiting. Beautiful flowers, and but I think it's more something that you could do if you're at that tourist vibe. I usually say to people, just go to Amsterdam and you have everything you want.
Okay, so on a note to Amsterdam, because some listeners have never been to Amsterdam, I actually stopped off at Amsterdam because I had my Europe trip and my layover is in Amsterdam, but I've never been there. So what places would you recommend a tourist to visit that's not so much a touristy place that people have heard of that you particularly enjoy?
I think Amsterdam is just amazing for the people that are there. And if we talk about open culture and just being able to be yourself and enjoy life as you want it, then Amsterdam is a beautiful, free place. So just walking around the streets and shopping a bit and taking a drink or something to eat there is already a lot. We have the Rijksmuseum, which is the big museum of Holland / Europe, which is also definitely worth a visit. If you want to be football wise, of course, you have to come to Eindhoven.
Wait, what's that called?
PSV Eindhoven, of
course. Where you're
at. You don't want to be in Amsterdam for football. No, but there's loads of nice places. But I think it's definitely the culture that's worth visiting.
Yeah. And I heard that Netherlands, large amount of your land, it's at or below sea level. There's a lot of water. Are there are you a nature person or not really? Do you like going outside?
A bit.
Yeah.
I love to go outside for a run or a bike.
For a run. Yeah. Okay. What are some nature sites that you maybe have been to that you would recommend a tourist to check out?
Ask me about hamstrings, please.
Wow, you're so you are so focused on your work that you can't even give me some good recommendations.
I think Scheveningen, the beach. We have the beach in Scheveningen, which is really nice. I'm more of a beach guy, so unfortunately the weather in Holland is not always beautiful. But when the weather is beautiful, that's a fantastic place to be in The Hague. Okay. And we have some islands up north, which are also definitely worth a visit and nice to go to, which are unique in the way they are. They're also very low to sea level.
So you pretty much work a lot. You don't do too much fun things. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure your work is fun, right?
My work is fun. I definitely enjoy a lot of things outside of work.
Okay. Yeah. All righty. Well, Nick, let's go right into your soccer experience. Obviously, Netherlands, it's a country, they say cycling is a popular activity for commuting as well as for an activity, but obviously football is there too. What activities were you involved in growing up?
I've always been into football. I actually played a little bit of football myself for one of the professional teams in Holland and the national youth teams. So for me, it's always been all about football, both at a club, but also in Holland, you have quite a big street football culture. especially back in my day when there was not a PlayStation 5 in the room yet. So we used to train at our club, and in the evening and in the afternoon we would also take a ball, pick up our friends, and play on the streets. And that was the main thing for me.
So soccer, that's it. There was no cycling or anything like that. Nothing else.
No, I only started cycling when I stopped football or soccer.
Are you serious?
Yeah, serious.
But they make it seem like cycling though, like people do it like from a young age, to get around.
That's I mean, like cycling for longer distances and stuff. But cycling is our second nature. I went everywhere with my bike, to the station, to the city, to my school. You do everything with your bike in Holland. Yeah, definitely.
But now you do like long distance cycling. How long do you do?
I actually have a racing bike. I think it's called like that. And now I go for like sometimes 40 to 100 kilometers, and just to stay fit a little bit. Yeah.
Here in Netherlands, you all are fit people, so that's pretty cool. I would fit right in.
We try to be. Yeah.
Well, I was looking at your journey, and I was really trying to piece together how it all came about, but I was struggling. So can you lay out to me, what was your journey first to studying to become a PT? Because it seems like you have many degrees there, and then kind of how you went to do your PhD and then to complete the football medicine and performance PhD.
Yeah. Well, for me, actually, up till my 20th or something, it was all about football and playing myself, because I was still playing professionally at that time. And I've always thought, okay, but I don't want to not do a study. So physiotherapy sort of came on the side because it was active, it was with people, it was close to football. A lot of players get injured, and then it was healthcare. So it was something that connected with me, but it was always in my head, sort of my secondary plan. And then when football became a bit less during my 20s, I got a little bit more fanatic about my physical therapy. I worked in a clinic for 10 years where I had a lot of academic physios, because in Holland, it's not a university study. It's a professional master, actually. And my boss actually said to me, like, yeah, I think you would be the guy to move on to a university, which is called physiotherapy science. It's more of the scientific side of physiotherapy. And he said, that study would actually be something for you. I always thought, now after my bachelor, I'm going for sports physiotherapy, because I'm a sports guy. But I started to see more and more where physiotherapy was going as a domain, but also what it could deliver to me if I would have an academic background. So I started physiotherapy science, never thinking that I would enroll into a PhD. But during that study, a professor, I had an internship with a professor, and he actually said to me, like, Nick, we are going to open up a PhD position, and we actually want you to do it. And I had to think about it a little bit, but it was in football. It was the Nordics project that I did, and I had some publications on that. And that's how I enrolled into the PhD. And during my PhD, I also did my sports physio master. So it was quite a busy time, but that's basically how it went.
So in Netherlands, you first, let me make sure I understand this. You first got a master's in PT, right? And then you practice, and then you went on to get your PhD in football medicine, but then you went back to get another master's in...
the physiotherapy is a bachelor, actually.
Oh, okay.
And it's not a university bachelor. It's we call it it's like a level low. So you cannot enroll from the bachelor physiotherapy in Holland. You cannot enroll into a PhD. It's not a master of science. So I had to do my physiotherapy science first, which the basic physiotherapy is 4 years. Then I did the physiotherapy science for 3 years.
I see.
And then I enrolled, because then after physiotherapy science, which is a master of science, I could enroll into the PhD. And I had quite a portfolio already. So I did some elements of the sports physiotherapy science, sports physiotherapy master. And got my license there.
Anyhow, I am really curious, because your journey is probably similar to mine, except I didn't play too long. I played in college and I played 1 year in Sweden, but I knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to become a PT if I didn't really care for soccer. And I clearly knew very early on that I wasn't interested in playing soccer to that level, but I love soccer now. But how did you know that you would have this love for this profession? Like, and I mean at the time that you were playing as a footballer.
I think because of the connection to football, that's one.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think the thing you love in the game, for me, it's two-sided. One, I love the game itself, just to be better than my opponent, or to, I was always an offensive player, so to dribble past somebody or to make a nice move and score goals and
Hmm.
give assists, that's part of the kick. But it's also a team game, so the connection you have with your teammates. I actually realized that when I stopped, because you every weekend you work from game to game, right? So every weekend you have sort of a high where you really try to perform your best
Yeah.
and try to win together. And yeah, when I stopped playing myself, that was actually out for a while. And in this environment, you have the same with PSV. We are contending for instance, the national title, but also for the cup, for European success. So you work from moment to moment, and when you lose together, of course, it's a bit depressing. But when you win together, it's also very nice, and it creates a very nice vibe.
Yeah.
So for me, the culture and yeah, that part of football is something that I automatically feel passionate about. So
Hmm.
working in that environment is yeah, is natural to me and seemed
Nice.
like a logical choice. Yeah.
Okay. And if you could tell me, you said you like to score goals. I was a striker too. What's a best goal that you can recall? I'm just trying to see if I might be a better soccer player than you.
You probably be much better. Oh man, yeah. I can say anything now. There are no videos, so
Oh my
let me
god.
hear
Now,
about
I
your
didn't
best
tell you
goal.
that I might share just snippets just to tell social media, hey, we got the episode coming. So,
Yeah, well, tell me, what's your best goal? I wonder now.
oh man, that's really hard. I was really good. No, I'm kidding. I actually don't know. I don't think I've ever thought about that, you know. Gosh, I don't have best goals. You know, when you score a lot, you just you can't think of all of them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Is
And
that your
what makes a good goal, right? It's sometimes
right?
it's a bicycle kick is beautiful, or
Yeah,
shooting from the middle line, but maybe the goalkeeper is also 30 meters in front of his goal. Or maybe it's a really important goal that you want scored. Yeah,
exactly.
there's
But I do
so
have
many
to say,
layers.
when I take a shot like outside of the box at different angles and it curls, I do like those shots, the finesse in it. So thank you for that.
I'll applaud to that.
So when I come to Netherlands, I'm gonna tell well, you're probably the boss there, but I might pull you aside just so I can show you my soccer skills one day.
You definitely have to. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know you said that, you were already into soccer. You played it and then you kind of worked your way into the club. But I think that there's still some steps that it takes to actually work for a professional club. How did you first get introduced? Because I think it was actually
Yeah.
is it Go Eagles that you
Go
first
with
started
Eagles.
working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Great research. So I always knew that I did this job, or I studied physiotherapy to work ultimately in football. But I always also said when I'm going to work in football, I know that I have to be there in weekends as well. And as long as I'm playing myself, I don't want to make myself available for the weekends as well, because I also have a personal life, of course.
Yeah.
So for the first 10 years of my career, I worked in a clinic where we saw a lot of football players, did the rehab, and everything I did was always about seeing football players, consuming knowledge about football injuries, football injury prevention, risk profiling. Everything I did was always towards football medicine. But I didn't make the step actually only until I quit playing myself, because I think there's nothing more fun than playing yourself.
Hmm.
So at one point I was like, okay, it's I would think I was like 34ish or something, 33.
Okay.
That's when I went to Go at Eagles, and yeah, that's the moment where was actually, they were a league below our top
in the
league.
second. Okay.
Yeah, in the second league, and that they played the games mostly on Friday night. So I still have my weekends off and could continue playing football. And I was there. Susanne Huurman, who is now a doctor at Real Madrid, she was actually the one who said, "We need a physical therapist. Would you be interested?" I went there for a conversation, thinking might be difficult because it was also quite far from my home. But yeah, the story just clicked, and the connection with Suzanne was also very good, and it felt like an amazing opportunity. So that's really when I made the step into football and became the first team physio for Go Ahead Eagles.
Yeah. And this was still when they were in the second division?
Yeah, when they were in the second division. Okay. They relegated that year. So I came in their first year back in the second league, and they are actually now back in the Eredivise, which is our Premier League, sort of.
Really? Yeah. But how did they find you to say, hey, we need a PT? Had they seen like all of the football stuff you've been doing?
Yeah, I think that, of course, I have a football background myself. So I know some people in the football world, but I think mostly because through my PhD, I got some exposure on conferences on my products. I was asked to lecture sometimes about hamstring injuries and stuff like that. So people in the medical world or in the football medicine world also knew about the work I had done, and also knew that I was already in a clinic for 10 years, seeing people with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of complaints. Yeah, and I think that's mainly how they came to me.
Okay. Cool. Yours is a little bit more straightforward, and that probably contributes to obviously the knowledge you had, but also your background, which probably made it easier. But Netherlands, you said there's 2 professional leagues now, though you're working in the top league for PSV or the PT there. At what point did you see that this move now to this team would be a best fit for you? Because they were both at this time in the top league, right?
Yeah, actually, I made a step in between. After Go Ahead Eagles, I went to, we have in Holland, we have the KNVB, which is our national team rehab center. And it's all the physios from the national team work there. And it's also a big clinic. It's a beautiful clinic where they see a lot of long-term football injuries. And they also do the injury, or they do the treatments for the professional football players from clubs that get injured, but they don't want to do the rehab at the club. Then they can come over to the KNVB and do it over there. And I was actually brought in there to do those rehabs for the long-term injured football players, which was amazing. The facilities there, like I said, are amazing, and you learn a lot about ACL, cartilage problems, and long-term injuries. So for my personal development within football medicine, that was an amazing place to be.
Yeah.
But it's not a team. I didn't have any team responsibilities, and like I said, you don't work from game to game. You miss that a bit. You miss the seeing the guys healthy, because there I only saw players that were really injured, and once they were back on the field properly, they would go back to the club and finish their rehab there. So you never saw them in their prime. And one part I really enjoy, also here at PSV, where we have the best players in Holland, you can see their qualities also when they are healthy. So of course I work with the rehab players, but I also see them when they are performing.
Absolutely.
And that's so I made that step in between.
Wow.
And from there, they put me in or they asked me here for a rehab position as well. So my focus is more also here on the injured players. We also have our team is 4 physios, 2 of which are more team physios. So they travel with the guys when they go into Europe. And when we are here at the Headgang, our training facility, we are always together. We are always there with the training sessions and everything. But then I work with the injured players, and the team physios work more with the guys that are in the team and in the squad.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to your experience working at that center where some of the professional football players would come to do their rehab instead of starting at the club. And I'm just curious because I think as a former athlete myself, and now as a clinician who also sees some of these athletes, I think it can be a little tough though, getting these athletes that are probably in not not saying that they're unhappy, but maybe they're dealing with a very long rehab, whether that's ACL. What was the toughest aspect about that job for you, first as a clinician, but then let's say per se working with the actual athletes, like the relationships that you were able to build, or maybe not so
Yeah,
much?
yeah, I think that's actually one of the nicest and most fun things in the job, that you get to build that relationship. And even when they are very down, it's about creating perspective. And I
Hmm.
think that the way I do that is by being very clear on what needs to be done, and also very clear on the time frame in which that needs to be done. Because a guy might come in after ACL injury and say, "Yeah, I want to be back in 5 months." um, and then I'll hold an evidence-based talk with him and say, like, okay, my philosophy is you should at least take 8 to 9 months before you return back to play. This is how we do it. This is the structure. These are the tests that we do in between. These are the progression criteria, and in each phase we work towards these criteria, and we also have to respect the physiological healing time. So once you tick this box off, for instance, we want to have a isokinetic test with a less than 5% deficit.
Hmm.
Okay, you are now at 20%, so we still need to do strength training in order to get there. And this functional, the hop test, for instance, okay, you are not able to jump yet, but in a week or 6, we will be able to jump, and then we have to make sure that you jump properly and also qualitatively and quantitatively jump to sufficient scores. And every time show the guys where they need to go, what the direction is, what they have to do in order to reach those criteria or to reach the goals that we set. And I think once you keep that focus on the guys, they are very much motivated to work. And it can be challenging sometimes because lots of players, every player is different, and one player might automatically do everything you ask, and one guy might not like strength training and say, I don't need this, just let me heal, and then I'll be back on the field and I'll be fine.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then it's about that connection, and also speaking the truth, and letting the player know what the risk is of, for instance, not being able not achieving certain criteria, or not having good strength, for instance, as a foundation to be back on the field.
Hmm.
And trying to motivate them to follow the rehab program. And yeah, I've always seen players that are highly motivated because ultimately they want to go back on the pitch. They have a lot of reasons to go back into the team. It's about playing the sport that they love, or financial reasons, or
Yeah.
just it defines them as a person. They are a football player, so they also want to be a football
Yeah.
player, not an injured football player.
Right.
Um, and the most difficult moments are the moments where um, not every rehab goes the way you want it to go. And there are also rehabs that are more difficult, or something happens and you're thinking, like, what is it? And you, even as a practitioner, you might get a bit insecure. Like, are we following the right direction? Am I right about this? Am I not? And then it's always important that you have a team around you, in my opinion, that you don't make decisions on your own, but you have a team. You make sure that you are informed by people who know, for instance, by orthopedic surgeon, or by another colleague, another physio, or maybe a sports physician that can help you with diagnosing or following the process and say, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that?
Hmm.
Yeah, and that way, making sure that you maintain your quality and that you maintain sure about the plan that you are providing, and then following the plan is I think,
Yeah.
key. Yeah.
And you mentioned something that I think holds true, at least even for me, sometimes when I'm rehabbing an injury that seems to have a little bit of bumps. Sometimes you begin to kind of question, like, okay, what else more could we do? In that moment, like, say, hey, we've kind of been kind of doing evidence based. We're taking this player, we're individualizing the program for them, right? But you're at that point where questions. Maybe you reach out to some of the other colleagues around you. But for you, what is there anything that you also have to remind yourself, maybe not now, or no, it could be now, that you have to remind yourself, okay, like this is still going as expected. Like, are there things that you do to almost reassure yourself, like, hey, there's a little bump on the road, but we're still going in that right direction? What strategies have you used for yourself?
Yeah, one thing is for me testing and measuring. I know that you cannot test and measure everything, but
Hmm.
just objectifying the things that you do is very important. Second, also for me, you see the patient every day, and guys know their body. Guys feel, for instance, their knee or their hamstring, and they know if it's right or not. And relying also on your own assessment and relying on the assessment of the player is very important, hearing what they say.
Hmm.
And I think last is also um, being truthful to yourself. If something doesn't work, not to stick with that plan, but unless you are thinking, yeah, but this is the way to go, and just takes more time, yeah, then it just takes more time. For instance, with tendinopathies, there's just one
Yeah.
way to go, and it's not very sure sometimes if it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 10 weeks that you have to maintain the strengthening phase, for instance, but you just have to stick with it, and it will be all right. But sometimes there's also, yeah, you're following a certain structure, or you're moving on, you see that the knee doesn't respond the way you want it to, and then you have to question yourself, am I doing right with the things that I'm doing or not? And then again, I always am very much a fan of including people around you, not and exposing your insecurities also to them. Like, I'm not sure if I'm following the right direction. Well, please think with me. What do you think? And if they make an assessment like, hey, I would alter the direction, or I would choose an alternative strategy, be open to that, and try to assess again whether that new strategy then is favorable for the treatment of that player or not.
Yeah.
Just staying open and critical about your own work is very important, I think.
And I think also the position you had, it requires you to be open because there's a difference between being embedded in a team. You know these players from their baseline, but in that position that you're in, you may not necessarily have those baseline
No,
information. So, what was that process like, even trying to understand, okay, not that you got them returned back to playing, because you said once you get them to a certain point, then they go back to their club.
yeah,
But did you feel that there was information at times that you were lacking, or did you have access to everything you needed for the most part?
yeah. It depends a lot on the club. It really depends on the club and the staff that's there. Sometimes you have players from, for instance, a first league team where they have one physio and not that many assessment tools, or not even time to assess all the players. So
Mhm.
then you get the player in, and yeah, you just start to work with him and start building the profile on your own. But communication is also always key here. So trying to get information across, receiving information from the club and from the physio at the club about the player, about his injury history, about his behavior,
Mhm.
and about his mentality is very important. So there you have already a package of information that you can utilize. Um, and some clubs, they have complete profiles. Yeah, and then you can use those as a benchmark. That's always nice.
Okay.
But in the end, uh, yeah, we also follow the structure of that we have on rehab. So we are all the time building our own profile as well. Yeah,
Okay. So some independence there for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
how did
Because
that
also, I think that a lot of clubs, like the KNVB where I used to work, it's really a rehab facility. They have a swimming pool, they have the biodex, they have the AlterG, and those are
wow.
things that, not in Holland at least, not all the clubs have it, because a club is not a rehab facility, right?
Right.
So in the big clubs they have these facilities, but especially in Holland the small clubs don't. So I understand it if they don't, then also don't have the information, because they are not a rehab facility, and we have all the time for the rehab players. But in a club, you also have to consider the healthy guys who are going into team. They might need an ankle tape, or they might need a massage now and then, or So physios in the club always have to think about both the injured players but also the team, because the team is the one that has to perform. And so it's hard to compare, and that's why I think at the KNVB was a great setting where we had all the time to assess the players, to help them with their rehab, and once they were back for team training, that's the moment where we would slowly let them integrate into the club again, and then they would move on towards game minutes.
Okay, so from that position, you then went on to work for PSV Eindhoven. I probably butchered that a little bit.
Yeah.
Was that okay?
You're doing actually really good. PSV Eindhoven.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay,
you're doing
that was
great.
better. Okay, so you went to that club. What is one of the most important, maybe tidbits that you took from that experience that kind of helped you further along your career now that you started at PSV, which was, I think, 2021 of June?
Maybe the number one thing is that we are a small radar in a very big machine, and that is very important because at PSV you have specialists. We have a head of performance, we have a head of nutrition, we have team physios, we have rehab physios, we have 3 doctors, we have coaches, physical coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, and everybody has a specialty within his domain. And if you talk about, for instance, rehabilitation, a lot of people are involved because it's about nutrition, it's about sleep, it's about strength and conditioning for the knee, but it's also about strength and conditioning, like general physical conditioning. It's about reintegration into the team, so coaches will also get involved at some point. And it's a lot about how do you utilize the specialties of all the guys that work here. How do we connect it to make sure that the player gets the best rehab possible? Because ultimately the players need to perform. If the players perform, they win. If they win, we look better as well. So
Absolutely.
Ultimately it's all about the team winning, and rehabilitation is just about adding players to the team that ultimately can win. So you're just a small piece of the big puzzle, and it's very important. And that's something that I learned here, that you find that collaboration with your staff members, and that you connect with everybody and make sure that the connection and the communication is optimal to deliver a great rehab for every player.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, because I want to make sure that I got this right. So you're the sports PT, but are you also the rehab coordinator? Kind of maybe take me through what an actual day is like for you, because it sounds like you don't actually always travel with the team either, right?
No, that's true. Like at Go Eagles, I was the team physio, so I used to do all the games and was also the match physio. So I would take the injuries on the field. Here at PSV, I am the rehab coordinator. So sometimes I'm present as a backup on the games, but we actually have 2 team physios who are always on field during the games. And usually when our team travels, for instance, they have a European game in the Champions League, then they travel with the team, the 2 physios, and me and my other colleague stay behind with the injured players. We make sure that the rehab is done, or we stay behind with a guy might be suspended as well. So we have one S&C coach, which is Jermaine McCubbin, who's also a big part of our rehab team. And then we stay behind and we take care of the rehab players and the injured players. And on a normal day, like for instance today, we have, for instance, double training sessions. Then in the morning, we are all together. We have a meeting in the morning where we talk about all the players, where we talk about their profiles, the plans that we have. Then the players get their treatments. Sometimes I'm treating the guys that are in the team. Often I'm more treating the players that are in rehab, obviously, if time allows it. Yeah, and then they go for the pre-activation or some strength and conditioning. And that's the moment where I then take, for instance, the injured players, and I work with the injured players alongside the group. Then the team has a team session, a group training, and I work individually with the injured players, with the S&C coach, and we will all be on the field, but I might be on another field or on the same field, but working with the injured players. And that's a little bit how my day is. And then in the afternoon, we try to connect them with the team again. For instance, if they do an upper body program, the rehab guys will join the upper body program of the team. Or sometimes I'll have something specific that I want to train with the rehab player. Then I'll take him aside. So I'm sort of working alongside the team, sometimes in the team, sometimes out the team. And just with the games, it's very separate. I'm not there with the games. Yeah.
Wow. But I mean, I'm just trying to even piece together. Obviously, you have your weekends-ish if the players are gone. But for some of the rehab coordinators I talked to, at least at work, maybe like in the leagues in the States, it doesn't seem like they are working as much with the athletes, but you are actually still working, treating. Like, when do you actually go home? Are you like, do you sleep? Go home? Be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Like the May in the weekend is my day off normally.
Okay.
So I'm probably in that sense quite lucky with my family that I have for me it's very clear what my day off is. It's the game day in the weekend.
On the weekend,
whereas the team physios, they have to follow the structure of the team, and the team has a lot of training sessions, so they normally have, for instance, a day off in the weekend or during the week itself, instead of in the weekend. So that's one thing.
But you see your family during the evenings. Do you see your family during the weekdays?
Yeah, I live like a 30-minute drive from the training complex, so I can drive home. And yeah, the days are different. Sometimes you have a day where you are finished at 2 in the afternoon, and you can drive home and spend some time with my kid or play football with my son or something. Or do a little dance with my daughter. And sometimes it's I'm here till 7 in the evening. That's also possible. But normally the evenings are also it's the evenings are off normally. So, but it is 6 days a week.
Yeah.
That's
very cool.
Well,
I have to say PSV, and I know you guys are inching, like you said it, to finish on the top, because the past 2 seasons y'all have finished in second place. And now and obviously you share what you can share, but I am curious because it's not like you guys are in a bad position, but like after finishing second place one season, then second place the next season, I mean, what is the conversations like maybe within the medical staff? Because clearly, did y'all have a lot of injuries, or maybe y'all didn't? Like maybe how we could even be better, because it's just like you're already almost there. What more? Like,
true.
You know?
Yeah, but the difficulty, I always say this, it's about setting goals, right? And our goal is to be champions. But let me take the example in the French league. Let's say Olympique Lyon, which is a great club with a big history, has the ambition to become champions. And they are doing everything right. They have the processes in place. They have the right people in place. They are developing over a course of 4 or 5 years, doing everything right. And here comes a sponsor bringing 500 million to their competitor, making sure that they get Neymar, Mbappe, and whoever in the striker position. And you don't become champion because they have better players ultimately.
Yeah.
Then is it then a shit season? Is it really a shit season? Because you've done the progression, you've had the structure, you've built your club, you've done everything that's within your hands to improve.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there was somebody else who had other processes in place that were better or had more money, and then basically you don't get to first place. I'm not saying that we couldn't have been. We all sense that we are very close, and I think that this year we will be the number one. So let's talk at the end of this season again. But in the end, it was just not enough. And Ajax Amsterdam have been very dominant over the past years. And last year, Feyenoord was in a very good place. They did it. They have to receive compliments. They had a great season all throughout. We were very close in both seasons, but just not there by an inch. And I think we are developing as a staff. We are developing as a team and as a club. So in the years that I've worked here now, I've seen a lot of progress. So I'm actually very happy to work here, and I'm very confident that we will get there this season.
Yeah. And I
but
would say,
yeah, it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. But I would say normally I try to follow all the soccer leagues because I'm also working. My goal is to cover a World Cup as a sports and injury journalist. But the league for the Dutch league, they don't really televise it here like on the major channels. So it's very hard to know what's going on. But I will say my favorite player, who you probably know, he's the leading scorer for the Dutch male national team. He's retired now,
Memphis.
but yeah, Robin van Persie. I was hoping one day I'd
Robin
meet
van
him while
Persie.
he played for Arsenal. Wait, what'd you
Yeah.
say?
Oh, I said Memphis Depay. He's not the goal scorer. He
Oh
might be, but
man,
I wonder if it's Memphis
it's
now
Robin
Depay or
van
it's Robin van
Persie.
Persie.
It's
Okay,
Robin
yeah,
van.
Robin.
Yeah, I think
Amazing
I know a
player.
little bit more than about your country than you do, but no big deal. Because you know about hamstring injuries, and that's what a lot of people want to hear about and get your
Yeah.
kind of expertise about. Well, considering that you decided to obviously study about football injuries, but specifically hamstring injuries, what about hamstrings even intrigued you to go even further into learning about these injuries?
The hamstring, I've always been very interested in the performance side of football as well. So if you talk about sprinting performance, the hamstrings are one of the injuries that come to mind quite quickly. But when I was offered the PhD, I had only one request. I said it needs to be about football. I will not even consider it if it's not about football. And they had this big hamstring project, because if it would have been about ACL or ankle injuries, I think I would have also considered it, because in my bachelor, I actually did a few projects on ankle injuries. But ultimately, it was a PhD about hamstring injuries. And I think the very interesting part about hamstrings is that they are rising. If you see how many injuries are, how the injury incidence has been going up, it's quite impressive.
So we're
And
experiencing more injuries. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, especially in training sessions. In games, it's a bit the same, but the impact of the hamstring injuries is by far the injury with the most impact in football. If you look from a financial perspective, on money lost on salary and stuff, but also on days lost, then the hamstring injury is the number one injury that creates the most days or the highest layoff from football. So I think in that sense, it impacts football a lot. And yeah, if you want to create a safe football environment with as least injuries as possible, then this is one of the injuries that you need to target mostly.
Now the research is continuing to develop over the years. So wouldn't you expect, and I mean that sometimes this can take a matter of years to see really the outcome of some of these interventions. Wouldn't you expect maybe eventually a decrease in the amount of time if we're continuing to advance? What do you think is really kind of keeping us still on that trajectory of increasing of
I
that
think the football
amount?
schedules are getting wilder and wilder. We had last year, we had a World Cup in the middle of the season, November, December. The summer break is also getting quite tight, and the winter break, for instance, the Premier League in England, there's not even a winter break anymore. I believe they just keep playing around Christmas and New Year's. So there's a high, there's the load on the players, and it's quite high. And also the game itself is becoming more intense, more high intensity runs, more sprints. So yeah, that I think that's the main reason, alongside the fact that we have some evidence-based preventive strategies, but they are not that well implemented. Of course, everybody wants to. It's also difficult because it's, for instance, the Nordic hamstring exercise has been investigated a lot. I don't believe I think the Nordics are evidence-based form of prevention, but it's not like if a team does Nordics that they will never get hamstring injuries. Prevention is a very big thing, and the Nordic might have its place in the prevention philosophy of a club, but it's definitely not the one thing that makes it. It's about load, it's about risk assessment, it's about pelvic tilt, it's about the hamstring strength, it's about all kinds of things that make up the susceptibility to get injured. And I think it's very important that the implementation of a good prevention vision is also embedded into a club. And this can be very difficult because you have so many games. So yeah, how much time do you have for your preventive strategies, and can you really do it? It's
And
a big thing, and it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, and that was what I was actually curious about, because before we talk about actual injuries, but just the prevention aspect, how does your team implement? Because obviously, I'm sure y'all have things you do for ACL injury prevention, other injuries as a whole. Is it typically performed in a general, like in a warm up? Do you guys incorporate some of these injury preventions, or is this something the team might do during their weight training session?
Yeah, I think it's in everything.
Okay.
So it's already like, how do they come in? Do they what's their wellness score? Are they fatigued or not? And then for having them assessed on the bench, what is the assessment? How what are they complaining about? What are the niggles? What are the actual injuries? Then it's about monitoring in the gym. We have always a pre-activation before we go, and the pre-activation is also some hamstring exercises might be embedded in there, but a guy who has, for instance, a patellar tendon sensitiveness might do some more isometrics on his quads, and a guy with a hamstring history or history of hamstring injuries might do some single leg Romanian deadlifts or something like that. So we try to individualize our prevention and tailor it to the risk profile of the player. And that's about what we do before training. It's about what we do during the training, in training. It's about the game minutes, and it's also about what we do after training, the recovery part of it all. So it entails a lot.
And for hamstring injury prevention programs, certainly there's FIFA 11 plus, eccentric exercises, different rehab programs. But real quick, any recommendations that you have for maybe an amateur versus a professional football player when it comes to implementing these programs?
Yeah, on an amateur level, it's I think doing the basics right is so important, and the basics is standardized warm-ups, listening to niggles and little complaints, making sure that they are noted in an early stage so they don't progress, but also like, for instance, if you play a game on Sunday, what are they doing on Saturday night? Because if they come drunk, they come home drunk every day at 5 o'clock in the morning and then play a game at 2. That might also not be beneficial. So just getting the normal and the basic things right is the first step. Second step would be to implement a prevention program. And the FIFA 11 has been investigated quite a lot. In Australia, you also have the Perform Plus program, which is also quite interesting. There are some programs out there which I think could be beneficial for amateur play. But on an amateur level, it can be also more difficult because the coach only has 2 sessions a week, for instance, or 3 sessions a week. And is he really prepared to give it 15 or 20 minutes towards to an injury prevention program when he has only so little time? So again, implementation is I think the thing we should talk about when we talk about prevention right now, because we have some products, but implementing them seems quite difficult.
And knowing what you know now with all your experience, when we talk about implementation, because certainly the athletes are there, they're accountable for their things, but it's also the clinicians, right, that are kind of guiding them. When it comes to actually implementing these rehab progressions while trying to make sure that you return them back as safe as possible, limiting the reoccurrence, what advice could you provide to clinicians? Maybe it might be something that you have seen that over these years and it's led to maybe athletes coming back injured. Is there something that you would want clinicians to hear when it comes to this implementation?
Yeah, take the time.
Yeah.
Take the time to do the important things right. Because sometimes we have a fantastic rehab, and the moment to play comes close, and we are you feel obliged, or the player really wants to be on the field, the coach wants him on the field, and you start squeezing the last part, whereas you've been working up to that last part so consciously, so nice with doing everything right. It makes no sense then to rush the last part. So yeah, doing the right things right and taking the time to make sure that somebody's ready. For instance, if you talk about a hamstring injury, did he? It's not enough. Did you actually sprint? But if he sprint back in on his max speed, did he also sprint with capacity? Because if he has the power to sprint, that's nice. He can sprint. But in a game, it's not about one sprint. It might be about 10 sprints, you know. And can he do that? Can he do repeated sprints? And did you actually work on his capacity to build both, for instance, his volume, to build his capacity in terms of sprinting, high intensity distance? It takes time. And it's not the most fun thing because you can also do that with straight line running and doing sprints dry on the field. But it is necessary to do this before you put the players back in the team. And sometimes I think there might be situations where people say, yeah, but he does the sprinting then in the team. But that's a different context because you have more chaos, it's more chaotic. You have a ball that's in front of you, you have an opponent that might push you, and you'll be in a full sprint. So are you really prepared for that? So yeah, taking the time to get everything right is, and also making sure from your end that you buy yourself time to do that, right? So for instance, prognosis, when the player gets injured, don't be too small on the prognosis, because if you say, yeah, you'll be back in a week, and you're thinking, yeah, it'll be 1 or 2 weeks, and you're saying, yeah, I think I can get you back in 1 week. And after a week, of course, the player's going to come to you and say, hey, you said that I could go, and you might feel obliged to put the player back into the team. Whereas consciously you're thinking, yeah, it would be much better if I take a few more days. So yeah, buy yourself time and take the time to get everything right.
Yeah, I think you bring upon a good point, and I know you happened to stumble upon hamstring research because you wanted to be involved with football. I do like how you really talked about the repeated sprints, because when I was an athlete in college, I suffered from a proximal hamstring injury, and I remember they were just like, "Oh, it's healing, just keep going, keep doing a thing." But we never had repeated sprints. There were just so many things that were missing, and the reality is that this injury actually followed me all the way when I played professional until today. I mean, now that I know what I know, it's getting stronger, but you can still feel that subtle difference strength-wise. I can feel it.
Yeah.
I guess, can you just point out for some listeners, because I think sometimes people assume, okay, it's a hamstring injury, it should rehab within a grade 1, whatever month, 2 to 3 weeks. But if it's a proximal versus a mid injury, what is the biggest thing that you would want a clinician as well as an athlete to know about this? Because for me, I dealt with a lot of frustration because they're like, oh, you should be better. And it wasn't quite better even after years,
Yeah, well, the difficult thing with, if you follow the evidence with physiological healing times, is that even though it's a proximal or distal, you have, let's say on average, somebody might be back in 3 weeks on average, but every average has a standard deviation, and there's a big standard deviation on the prognosis of hamstring injuries. So for instance, you might say, yeah, on average it's 3 weeks, but it might range anywhere from 1 to 5 weeks. And you don't know in advance whether you are the one that can rehab in 2 weeks or the one that has to take 5 weeks. So I think there was a very nice publication from Erik Witvrouw, who wrote that we need to respect the biological healing time, and that if it's a grade 2 injury, for instance, that you should always respect 4 weeks of physiological healing, because it's just not healed if, even though all the criteria are good, you're still susceptible for injury. So I think it's always about 2 things. That's one, the physiological healing time, respect that, and don't try to force it, because you can't force physiological healing. And there's also no evidence that PRP, which is very popular in some regions, or any other strategy can enhance physiological healing. We just can't, and we have to be very clear that there is no evidence that we can enhance physiological healing. And the second is that we follow a criteria-based structure, whereas in the beginning, that's quite easy. You need to have all the flexibility, you need to have all the strength, you need to have good movement quality. That's quite easy. But also, on the end of the spectrum, you need, for instance, we have GPS based rehabilitation, of course, but we target the worst case scenarios in our game. So if a guy has to run for 12 kilometers in a game and then maybe make a sprint in the 90th minute, I want to make sure that in my rehab, he can do 12K run with a sprint in the end. And that doesn't mean that I will make him run in the woods for 12K straight and then let him sprint. But in my philosophy, I have to build capacity for just jogging, for running, but also capacity for high intensity running and capacity for sprinting. And especially capacity for sprinting is something I think might lack in a lot of field rehabs, because they get exposed then for the first time in the group with the actual maximum sprinting, which might be a bit too early, and then you get a recurrence again. So taking a week more to build that capacity and then letting somebody back into the group, but knowing that you've prepared them for the worst case scenario, is, in my opinion, a much safer way than making somebody sprint one time, saying that he can sprint, and putting him back into the team already without really acknowledging that he also needs capacity, or she also needs capacity, of course, because it's for both the same. So yeah.
And you talked about towards the end, the harder part, right, is obviously making sure that the running at different levels, preparing them for the worst case scenario. Now, when you say return to play, because like we've seen in research, defining what that actually means is really important. In your own words, what would you call it when you say an athlete's ready to return to play? What exactly all have you gone through with your team, with the player, with the coaches to come to that conclusion?
Yeah, well, it's actually we did a big Delphi study with some FIFA medical centers about this, and we wrote that return to play is the moment where the player has medical clearance and is ready to compete in a game again. But of course, it's a continuum, because he might be ready for 15 minutes, or for 30, or for 90. That's still a continuum, because somebody, once he is out of rehab, you're never going to put him into a 90-minute game immediately. You build up the match minutes as well. So I would see it as a continuum, whereas return to play for me is defined the moment that the player plays again and makes match minutes, because that's also the moment that he's really out of rehab and starts the secondary prevention program. So that would be my definition, but I would keep in the back of my head that it's a continuum where any player that's injured and has recovered and is back into the team should be considered injured for another 3 months, based on the prevention that you do with him. And then the prevention is not only, for instance, eccentric strength training after a hamstring injury, but prevention is also load management. If he's on the bench, for instance, because he was on the bench when he was injured, and the player comes back, but he's not immediately in the first team, but he might be back later, you have to make sure that he stays at that level of sprinting, high intensity running, and because usually the subs are doing less than the first 11, right? But you have to build that player towards the first 11, because there might come a moment where he does need to play, and if he's then not ready to play, for instance, 60 minutes, it's going to be a dip in his load again, and then a spike in his load, and we know that might also increase his risk of injury.
And for amateur footballers, say maybe they're just in high school or maybe in college, but maybe they don't have that kind of continuum going on, what advice could you give them regarding to, even though they've returned back to playing with their college team or their high school team, they came back from a hamstring injury, how can they themselves implement that continuum in their own way if their medical team isn't necessarily pushing for that?
Very, 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 very good question. And I will be honest here. Ultimately, it comes down to, do we trust the player themselves to manage their injury situation? Because that's basically what we're asking. Can you do it right yourself? My answer would be no. I don't think that a player can. So the club or the environment needs to have somebody there, or somebody to accompany the player or provide knowledge to the player on what he should and should not do and how to build that. And I think that's a responsibility for the club and that's very difficult, especially on an amateur level. I get that, but I also think that we cannot expect a player without a medical background or without any knowledge of injury and injury prevention to make the right decisions on returning back from a hamstring injury, because we can say, yeah, just make a progression, but what's that progression like? What does it mean, progression? What are we talking about? Is it about minutes? But yeah. Is it about load? Is it about recovery? Is it about strength training? What is it? So there needs to be a plan, and I think that plan needs to be put in place by somebody who knows what he's doing.
I think that's a great answer. I think that's a great answer, because clearly when I finished my college season and still had the injury and was not educated, I was trying to do things and I was still struggling. So athletes. So even if you've returned back to the sport, whether, like you mentioned, if it's within a club or even maybe finding a PT that's specialized, whatever, in hamstrings or sports injuries to kind of monitor you in a clinic, would probably be the best bet to set you up in the long run. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Well, finally, because I know I'm nearly out of time, if there's one thing that you wish you would have known that you know now when it comes to hamstring injuries, just in general, what would it have been? I know you said time, but I want you to tell me maybe something specifically, maybe a certain injury or a certain exercise maybe that you now know more about.
So the one thing I find very interesting in terms of hamstring injuries right now is the role of the pelvis, and especially also the contralateral side, the function of the iliopsoas towards the hamstring on the other side, pelvic positioning during movement, especially during sprinting. How does it affect each other? I think this is a very interesting element towards hamstring prevention. Sorry.
Is there anything we know about that? Because I don't know that there's not a ton of research yet, right?
There's not a lot of research yet. Wow. Jordan Mendiguccia did some nice studies on this. And I believe Johan Lati also had some interesting publications about the role of the pelvis. And they developed the Jordan test, which is a test to mix the hamstring flexibility with the contralateral iliopsoas and seeing how much flexibility you have in that region, which is a little bit more sport specific and sprint specific, I think, than, for instance, a Thomas test or an active straight leg race test. So this is very interesting. And I'll come back to it, but like the end phase of field rehab, I think what I noticed when I was in the clinic, I was doing a lot of hamstring injuries, but then that last phase comes and you're not actually there with the amateur player to assess the volume or his load in training. So he might still be underloaded when he's back into the team. And I think this element, that final phase, because it's very easy to get somebody with a hamstring injury to a pain-free status. And strength usually develops also quite quickly. Sometimes guys that have a grade 2 can already do a maximum strength test on a Nordboard or on like a MacLeod test after a week or 2 or 3. But can they also sprint maximally? And how do you progress from maximal strength to actually sprint capacity and sprint power? And this is something I think you should take your time for. And rushing this leads to re-injuries. So often is rushed a bit, or it's difficult in that end phase to say, but I can already sprint. Why should I sprint more? Because you have to build capacity. But I can build capacity in the training sessions. Can you really? Because do you have like a sports scientist standing on the edge of the field monitoring how much you are actually sprinting? No, you do not, especially not in an amateur environment. But that is a key and crucial part, I think, of prevention, that you build capacity.
And I think that's something that I missed even during my college, even professional in Sweden years. that if any athletes listening, pay attention to that. Now, I might not be able to sprint as fast now, but give me 2 more years and I'm going to be at Netherlands to sprint and I might beat you. Okay.
And I want to see you finishing as well, because I didn't forget. I want to see you put the ball in the corner. Yeah.
Last question. What drives you and what inspires you to keep pushing, to learn as much, to grow as a clinician, despite all of these years you've been practicing?
For me, it's all about connection with the players. I love the football culture. So the connection with the players and football as a game is amazing. And I think also the ability to perform and optimize a performance to achieving something, whether it's a prize or a performance, that's something that's driving me a lot. And also just the pleasure in my occupation. I have fun every day. I laugh with the guys every day. And that keeps me going and gets me in here every day with a happy face. I hope to keep doing that for a long time and stay as happy as I am right now.
Yeah.
Never know.
I hear Netherlands are one of the happiest people too, right?
yeah. Maybe because we are so direct and
but you know what though? But I have heard that you guys don't like when you have unexpected visitors. Is that right? Like, no, I can't come knocking on someone's door like, hey, surprise. Y'all don't like that, right?
It's a funny thing. My wife is actually, she doesn't have a Dutch background. She has a Latino background, and I'm always amazed about the birthdays. You know, when it was with my family, it was quite formal. You know, you just sit down and everybody's quite calm, and you have some gifts, and that's the holiday. And when she has a family over for a birthday, it's everybody comes in, and it's all fun. And I think that's something we as the Dutch can learn to involve people a little bit more. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Okay,
but
so you are
more than welcome
wife
to visit, and our door will be open for you.
Okay, great to know. Well, Nick, I really appreciate your time, and I know that you are super busy, but this podcast only works with all of you guests that have gladly chosen to spend time with a complete stranger and now friends. So thank you so much for your time and for all of your insights. I hope to see you sometime in Netherlands.
I would wish for that. Yeah, I definitely look forward to that.
All right. Best wishes in the season and take care.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the episode, like I said it, please go rate it and share with your fellow colleagues because we got more content coming your way.